So greetings. Welcome to us Outside the Class. December 20th, 2022. We continue on our Matthew series. We're on episode 21, Mustard, Bread, and God's Kingdom with Tim Mackie. This way of doing things, you can watch the video before we begin chatting. We hope to keep these to around 15 minutes or so. Easy to catch, easier to catch up on. And we have the Dusty Feet live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget, in the description below are links to all the audio, video, and source documents we use here on the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, learning we do here does not happen. So don't forget to subscribe. Click that bell icon if you want a reminder. And as always in the Dusty Feet, this is a place we can safely explore the endless ways of God, the interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go with some more Outside the Class on the Dusty Feet. As always, it is expected that you watch the reference videos first, so you can get a context for this discussion and to hear the perspective of the originator, in this case, Tim Mackie. I link all the videos for each week in advance on the TheDustyFeet.com website. It's on the Outside the Class page. So if you have not yet, pause this, click on the link in the description, then we can come back and start chatting. Hold. As a caution, if you have not listened yet, the audio in this episode is less than optimum. It sounds like they're recording the speakers that are being used in the auditorium. So you might need to really concentrate to hear. And we're back. You know, when we hear these stories or parables, I smile when I think that there are more than a few different thoughts on any of these. And I'm not here to debate any one in particular. Again, though, as we already talked about, that even Jesus said that the meaning of these parables would be at least hidden from them. So when we are again thinking of throwing them under the bus for not recognizing or engaging Jesus, we might need to cut them some more slack and think about that whole them us thing, right? And if this is a part of the kingdom of God message, right? And we believe it is, again, how can we expect them to grasp the kingdom of God and still be confused? So one of the things that stood out to me was really something that I hadn't thought of before, right? This is cool. It was a new thought to me, and it related to size and impact. Size and impact. Both the mustard seed and the starter for the bread, they were small with a large impact. And from a very visual perspective, I saw that thinking even more expressed. The picture of the mustard seed, the bush, the tree, right? That from something that appears to be grown from something insignificant, but it actually becomes a rather impressive creation. Hard to ignore, really. This is not a bush or a tree that's easily hidden or ignored. This would not be a weed in the road. The visual description of the bread, 60 pounds of flour, that would, of course, depending on the size of each loaf, but the volume would feed 100 people. Again, hard to ignore, at least from a food amount, that this would have quite an impact on the local community. But both of these, and it hit me, both of these are little things with potentially large impacts. So let's take each a bit further for the sake of the discussion, right? That each has the capability, if used well, not only that, but to make a multifold impact of really untold measure. The seed from the mustard plant, you keep tending and you keep planting those things, and that impact is endless. But bread, as Tim shared, is very much a kitchen practice to use each batch as a starter, to use a little from the previous batch and use that to start and nurture the next, to prepare the next batch. And that as well is an ongoing thing. My wife and I, we enjoy a number of cooking type shows, mostly about the culture behind and the preparation of those community foods, but also how they often reflect the time, area, and the history of the local community. So in the Mexican culture, there's a food called mole. It's created often in the same way, kind of, as the bread we've been talking about. There's a starter from the previous batch that is used to start the next. And like the bread, as each batch of mole is made, this is a combination of history and tradition along with the present. I really like this picture. There's so many spices and ingredients in mole. In the story I watched, the batches were made, new ones, every 7 to 10 days. And the batch that they were eating and talking about had a 1,267-day lineage. That there was a passing down for 1,267 days with a new batch every 7 to 10. So if we thought of that as generations per se, that could be between 127 and 180 generations. Like in dog years, that's a lot. But how much more are we? How many generations have been passed down that we've been impacted by their bread? How many mustard trees have been grown and have seen the fullness of and create new seeds that have continued to spread impact? Maybe to put more into that analogy of impact, I have to agree that mustard, for its small seed size, but is crushed and mixed, the flavor, that has quite an impact for such a small seed. But spreading through influence to be added to the new spices added to the mole are important, but without the past as an influence, it would not be a mole of influence, one with a storied past that reaches into the future. Then Tim talked about Jesus and his being known, right? Known. That has much baggage with it. It can be good and not so good. Being known has its benefits. We see it every day in social media, for example, right? But there's also being known for the past, right? As in the aging sports hero from high school in Bruce Springsteen's glory days. Or that someone has done something in the past that they would no longer do, but it still haunts them. Paul fits in that category. So then we have Yeshua, a member of a family child of Mary and Joseph, one of many kids. He's just the oldest. They have a couple of stories with this family. They come from a small village. Tim mentions maybe 400 to 500 people. But the collective memory of that village has, let's see, suspicious circumstances with Mary's pregnancy. Then the family takes off to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, right? And they end up hanging around there for a few years. They're visited by kingmakers. You know, that's a group traveling of this magnitude and influence that would have spread a lot of stories around the land. Got Herod's attention, but the village probably does not know that why behind that one. Just that it was a series of horrific events that would follow that, right? The purge, the killing of an entire generation of children, 2 and under. But Mary and Joseph, they flee to Egypt. They stay there for a number of years. Then they return home. That alone in itself in today's social media would keep that alive for, well, at least a couple of weeks. So Joseph and his family, they return to their small village. Stories swirling around them because they're not in a vacuum. He could maybe have lived elsewhere. Joseph's thought of living around the Galilee region was thwarted, though. It was back to Nazareth. He raises Jesus, and the next time we hear of him, we're back in Jerusalem for a feast. Passover. Not, ironically, really, but very much an important note since these milestones, they would be both on Passover. His interaction at the temple, like a debut, right? A bit, and his last, that would then lead to his death, burial, and resurrection. But on this trip, he's left behind by his family. And the caravan returning, boy, would they have some stories to tell. Then we're pretty much vacant with information until he starts his ministry with a mikveh by John in the River Jordan. Finally, now we're this part in the story that Matthew is telling about with the rejection of Jesus in Nazareth. They are very much aware of the stories of Jesus, just not the stories we've heard about. It's the baggage that they're carrying. They only know that part of Jesus. That is what they have seen and they've lived with. So I'm not really surprised with their reaction either, honestly. Um, Actually, to be honest, it's very much an us reaction as well. Because when we hear about a person, we don't always see the story of where they are at the moment. We only want or have the pictures of the past. We are most brutal with this idea, anyways, with our families. We don't tend to like change in their lives, even simple things like haircuts. It's we that can have a hard time picturing them in any other way. Again, we are them and they are us. And more grace given to them since we, at least I would expect, would hope to get the same with folks looking back on our stories. So the kingdom of God, would it really start with the son of a carpenter? They missed it. It scares me more often than I care to admit how many things I have possibly missed because I had already determined no good can come from there. Or someone told me and I just went along. That also goes deeper than I care to admit. May we seek and continue to learn with eyes and ears wide open. May we give others the grace to do the same because Jesus sure did. He let them learn on their own time because his story, it is compelling. We truly are the living benefactors of the folks in these stories surrounding Jesus. We need to be aware that others will look back one day and see our influence. So, what will it be? What was our addition to the bread, the mole? Are we the willing follower or the hard learner? To be fair, we can move from one to the other. I have in my past been a hard learner, but I'm trying to become more of a willing follower. So we're back to our point to ponder for the day. And I love this. And again, it will continue to be our mantra for a while because we need to remember, make no judgments where you have no compassion. Again, make no judgments where you have no compassion. Thanks, Anne McCaffrey. And thanks for with us today with another episode outside the class on the Dusty Feet.